This is Magic and Mortar. Welcome back, everyone. We are so glad to have you here watching these videos. I've got another tutorial for you today where I'm going to show you how I like to make trees. I think that making trees for your campaigns can be a really daunting task. There are so many videos already out there, so many ways to approach making trees. I've tried a dozen different ways, and I've come up with what I think is the most consistent way to make an extremely durable tree that also is very real. So you guys go ahead, sit back, enjoy the video, and I hope that you'll be making your own trees in no time. Thank you so much for watching. The very first step you want to do here is to grab a tape measure and pull it out to the 36-inch or 3-foot mark, and then you're going to need a spool of wire. I am using 18 gauge wire. You can find this in the jewelry section of your local craft stores. To begin making the tree, you'll want one 6-foot length. The simplest way to do this is to pull out 3 feet, bend it in half, and then pull out the other 3 feet of wire. So we have one 6-foot length that is folded in half. I real quickly just want to advise all the viewers to please be careful when you are doing this step. The wire is very stiff and it will want to bounce back into that shape it had on the spool. When you're cutting the wires in half, the edges are very sharp, so please be careful when you're doing this step. Now that you have your 6-foot length folded in half, grab a pair of scissors and just cut that wire at the bend. We're going to repeat this process over and over until we have about 6 inches of wire. So go ahead and grab the 3-foot lengths, fold those in half now, and then grab the pair of scissors again and go ahead and snip right at the bend. Alright, now you should have 4 lengths of wire, and you're just going to repeat this process over and over. So go ahead and bend the wires in half, grab your scissors, and then simply snip each wire right where you bent it in half. Go ahead and grab your wires, fold them in half one last time, and then cut them at the bend of the wire. Don't stress too much right here about the length of each wire. It's okay if they're a little bit uneven. It will make the tree look more natural in the end. For this next step, you want to take all of the wire lengths that you've cut and twist them into one solid piece, kind of like a braided rope, if you will. In order to do this effectively, I highly recommend a power drill. If you don't have a power drill, you could probably still manage, but it'll be more difficult and the piece might not come together as well. So in preparation for using the power drill, we'll want to take the ends of the wires and just bend them a little bit straighter so that way we can fit all of the wires into the drill shaft on the power drill. With your bundle of wires inserted securely into the drill shaft, you will want to pick up a pair of pliers and hold on to the loose ends of the wire bundle. At this point, you'll squeeze on the trigger of the drill to kind of twist all of the wires in together to form one giant cohesive braided wire there. This will become our tree trunk in the next steps. For this next step, we will be making a base for our trees. Now, because of the way we make the trees, we make them very durable, but they're going to be heavier than our typical styrofoam pieces. So because of that, we will want something to weigh down the base. I use washers. The size of the washer doesn't really matter, just make it appropriate for the size of the tree. If you're making a very large tree, you'll want larger washers because they need to be heavier. Trace the outline of your washer onto a block of styrofoam and then use whatever cutting tool you have nearby to cut out the block of styrofoam for your base. Just be sure to leave enough space that your washers will sit comfortably into the base of styrofoam that you've cut. Begin to cut out a recess to fit your washers comfortably into your base here. I am using a hot pen knife, which is a tool that I've grown to like very, very much. You'll see in all my other videos that I use it very frequently. When I'm cutting out this recess here, I do come in from the side just to get it all nice and smooth. This does leave a little bit of a hole in the side of our base, but that's okay because we can just fill that in later and it just speeds up this step right here. Using a hot glue gun, we're going to attach the washers to the base. Go ahead and just apply a good amount of hot glue to that recess and then firmly press the washer into the hot glue. You're going to want a good amount of weight to the base for the tree if you're following along here. I'm using 2 washers because of this. I'm going to also go ahead and add a bit of styrofoam to that center hole there just to kind of fill the gap. So go ahead and apply more hot glue and press a piece of styrofoam in just like that. Now we have the base of our tree ready for the next step. Grab your wire tree trunk and find a good spot for it on the base here. Get a good idea of where you want it to sit. If you need to, go ahead and trim any of the odd lengths of wire as necessary. And also you may need to use a pair of pliers again to twist and finish braiding the end of the tree trunk here so that it sits firmly into the styrofoam base. Push the tree into the styrofoam and use hot glue to secure it in place. We're also going to be using hot glue on the rest of the tree here. Just be careful to leave the ends of your wires free. We want those to be able to move later so that we can shape them as desired into our tree branches. The two reasons that we're applying hot glue right now are, one, to provide further structure to the entire tree, and also to hide the fact that we made the tree using twisted wires. If you'd like, go ahead and take a moment to pipe out more hot glue on the base here to act as roots for your tree. I wasn't very happy with the shape of my base, so I'm going to go ahead and take my hot pen knife and melt away some more of the styrofoam. You will see that I did take off more styrofoam than intended, and I've exposed the washers underneath. Now, at first, this might look like a mistake, and it is, but there's a really simple and effective solution. We'll get into the details later, but for now, just know that adding a quick layer of drywall mud is all you need to cover up any mistakes, like accidentally removing too much base material and exposing the washers underneath. Using a pair of pliers or your hands, you can go ahead and start bending and manipulating the loose ends of the wire into place for your tree branches. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You really just want to have a variety of lengths and heights. So just go ahead and start bending them out until it forms kind of a bizarre looking tree shape. With your tree branches in position, you'll want to pick up your hot glue gun and begin piping hot glue along the wire branches. We are doing this to add a little bit more thickness to the wire branches because right now they are too thin and they're out of proportion. And also we're doing this so that we can bond the branches with the rest of the hot glue along the tree trunk itself so that our piece becomes more firm. All of my projects receive a layer of all-purpose joint compound, and this tree is no different. If you'll watch any of my other videos, you know that I do this for a variety of reasons. For this tree here, I am providing more structure and stability for the overall piece. It's also going to tie together any mismatched materials, so the exposed washers, the styrofoam, and the hot glue are all going to tie together and have one uniform texture. And it's also going to provide a better surface to paint on. If you try painting on hot glue, it's very obvious that, oh, that's hot glue that's been painted over. And so with this all-purpose joint compound, we're also adding this texture that's going to add another level of detail and a better surface to paint on for the tree bark itself, and it's going to look really good in the end. Now we are on to the canopy of the tree. I have tried so many different materials to nail down a strong canopy that looks real, and I think I've finally found it. I enjoy using this tree moss, and if you have lichen, they're very similar. You can use lichen as well. Your science lesson for the day: moss is a plant and lichen is a fungus, but for our purposes, they function exactly the same. So go ahead and get out some tree moss if you have it. You can pick this up in the garden center of your craft store. Go to wherever they're selling like flowers and you can find this in bags there. So for this, what we're going to be doing is just see what pieces kind of fit onto the tree branches, and when you're happy with what you've come up with, you'll just apply hot glue to the ends of the branches and then firmly press the tree moss into the hot glue. What I like to do to get a really solid bond is I'll put the tree moss onto the branch, and then I'll actually pinch down with my thumb and my finger on the bead of hot glue to kind of get the entire bit of moss to bond to the branch there. When you're applying the moss here, just try to think of what trees you've seen in nature and kind of build your tree accordingly. So for me right here, the underside of my branches was very bare and it looked kind of awkward. So I'm just applying a little bit more of the tree moss to the underside of the branch, and I think it came out looking very well. The next step will be coating the entire tree in a layer of brown spray paint. This is going to act as a primer and a nice undertone for our shadows for the tree. So I've got a nice dark brown paint here. As always, just read your warning labels. Make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. Be careful of overspray. If you have a Walmart bag nearby, cover your hand with it. You don't have to do that, but anyways, if you'd like to, it'll keep your hands nice and dry. So go ahead and do this to the tree. This is going to give us everything I've already mentioned. It's also going to provide more structure to the tree moss itself. The canopy of our tree is kind of flimsy right now, and so we're going to go ahead and add a layer of paint to start building up the strength in the canopy so that in the end, it's going to be all one solid piece. For the next step here, we're going to be using a very strong adhesive spray, and we're going to be flocking the tree moss, the top of the tree canopy there. So what we want to do is, I like to use a piece of contact paper, but really any kind of paper or tape will work here. We are just covering any bits of the tree that we do not want affected by the flock. So we're covering the base and we're covering the trunk. That way we can move on with our spray adhesive and begin flocking the canopy. In my experiments in creating the perfect trees, I have used many different techniques and spray adhesives. I've used different polyurethane varnishes, different tacky sprays. I've used other spray glues. I've even used the Woodland Scenic spray glues, and I have found nothing to work quite like the Gorilla spray adhesive heavy duty that you see here. It is a fantastic product, in my opinion. It is going to allow us to flock this flawlessly, and it's also going to dry extremely stiff and rigid. The canopy of the tree will still have a little bit of bounce to it after we flock and it dries, but it's going to be very stiff. So just like when you're painting, you want to flock with different materials. You want to have lowlights and highlights and such. So when I flock my trees here, I'm going to be using at least 2 different blends. For the first blend, I'm going to be using a Woodland Scenics Blended Turf Earth Blend, which is green with subtle hints of brown in it. And so I'm going to go ahead and apply the Earth Blend flock to the entire canopy of the tree here. Shake off any of the excess earth blend that you just applied in preparation for our highlight flock we are going to use. When you're highlighting with flocking, you want to work from the top down. So you'll take the spray adhesive and spray from the top down and flock from the top down. We're not worried about highlighting the underside because naturally this tree would be brighter on the top where it's in direct sunlight. So with this application, we have a very real looking tree. Now, when that's all done, you want to take your Gorilla Glue spray adhesive and apply just a thin layer to help seal everything in place and provide further structure for the piece. Alright, now we're on to the painting steps here. So we need to paint our base and our tree trunk. For my painting steps, I always use acrylic paints. They are cheap and easy to use, they dry very quickly, and they're excellent for wet blending and dry brushing. So I highly recommend getting used to the acrylics when it comes to painting miniatures like this. So the painting process for this tree is a very simple one that even beginners can handle. The spray paint that we applied was a brown espresso color. And then we're going to be applying a lighter and lighter shade of brown until we achieve wonderful highlights and shadows that make the tree really pop and look very real. So after you have your spray paint base coat, I'm using a burnt umber brown, which is a shade lighter, to apply just a little layer of highlights on top of the espresso. I'm going to be using the same brush here, and I'm going to be picking up a nutmeg brown and just kind of blending a little bit of that with the burnt umber. And you'll see we'll take the nutmeg now and apply another layer. I like to go against the texture of the tree. That way you can pick up the ridges and leave the recesses very dark. So in this particular instance, you'll see that the texture of the bark of the tree has very vertical grooves in it. So I'll be brushing horizontally onto the model so that I'm picking up just the ridges with my highlight tones. Before I got any further with my highlights, I wanted to go back and add a little bit of red tones to the tree itself, just to give it a little bit more color, so that it looked a little bit more alive and vibrant. Sometimes when you're working with browns, it can get really dull and boring unless you incorporate other vibrant colors. So that's what I'm doing here. Back to the highlight process of the painting here, we're going to go back and pick up some more of that nutmeg and blend it with a little bit of white, and you can see how the tree really starts coming to life when you're hitting just the edges there with that very light shade of the nutmeg on the ridges of the bark. It looks fantastic when it's coming together here. And lastly, I'll be dry brushing a little bit of white, so you'll see I'll dab the white onto the washcloth there, pick up a little bit more, dab it again on the washcloth, and very gently horizontal brush strokes here. We're picking up just the very tips of the ridges so we can get just a final highlight of a very light white color that makes the tree really come to life and look very much real. The tree and the canopy of the tree are finished at this point. You can see how wonderful the paint job has come together, and the flock on the canopy of the tree as well. The underside of the branch is looking really good there. All that's left to do now is finish the base of the tree. For the base of the tree, I have chosen to paint it rather than flock it. You could do either if you'd like, but I think that sometimes adding too much flock to a piece can take away from just the natural aesthetics of the piece. So for the base here, we'll just combine a primary yellow and primary blue to form a green color here. Cover the entire base with a green, and then with the same brush for your highlights, you're just going to go back and add in some more yellow. So you're blending yellow into this green color, just making it more yellow and green. And then finally, you're going to go back and pick up some whites and just start working on more and more highlights. Just be mindful that when you're doing the highlight process, every time you're going back to the piece, you want to use a lighter hand. You don't want to cover up the undertones that you just set. So every time you're working in another highlight layer, make sure that you're using a lighter hand and maybe a little less paint in your brush. Now, as always with my pieces, I like to add a few more bits at the end just to tie everything together, going a little above and beyond, and then adding just a little bit of whatever artistic flair you want to put onto the piece. So, again, you can pick up, this is just some more tree moss, and you can pick this up in the garden center of any of your craft stores. So I'm just going to use a bit of hot glue here, and then a piece of this cool looking tree moss here, and then glue it to the base of my tree. Not only is this a fun, neat way to add a little bit of creativity to your piece, but also it helps hide any imperfections. So on this tree base here, there was a bit of space where the washers were still kind of poking through and that area hadn't fully gotten covered. So I'm using the same exact material that we made the canopy out of. This is just a little bit of that tree moss, and I've just glued it in to cover up that hole on the base there. These trees are just the absolute strongest combination of materials that I could come up with while still maintaining a very realistic appearance. You can see how tough they are. You can hit them on the table there. You can shake the tree as hard as you want, and that flock is just not going to fall off. The canopy itself is very rigid and firm. There's a little bit of bounce to it, but you can see as I'm squeezing it, it doesn't want to give. And you can feel that in person better than I can show you on video. Just trust me, these things are fantastic. You can drop it on the table and it will retain its shape. Hands down, the best possible trees that I could come up with on my own. I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. As always, thank you so much for being here. Your support just means the world to me. I love making the videos, and I hope to be cranking out more and more. I do have another giveaway planned really soon, so please subscribe and stay in touch. We'll be doing that really soon here. I've got another tree video that I'm going to be pumping out real soon to show you what I've learned when dealing with trees is that you want to have a variety. If you have a variety of trees, it makes it look much more real. If you had like 30 of this style on your table, it would look cool, but it would look very cartoonish. So you need to have a variety to mix it up. So stay tuned for more trees and a giveaway, you guys. I hope to see you at the next video. Thank you so much for watching.